Hello and welcome to today's webinar. iFoods and GFEGA is very proud to bring Diane and Samir together and have a discussion about the importance of data and what this means for us. We've got people that are still joining, so we'll get started in just a few minutes. Please stand by. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, my name is Beth Olson. I'm with the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, and I am very pleased to be here to be your host for today's webinar. The Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association came together with iFood DS several months ago, and we decided that it was really pertinent for our growers to understand a little bit more about data. The recent rollout of the FDA's Smarter Era for Food Safety, and what that means for farms. So this is the third, I think it's the third or the fourth, I think it's the third of a series of webinars that we have been co-hosting together just to talk about all the different aspects of data and traceability and how, not only what it is, but how we can actually make it work for our farms and our farming operations. So I am very, very pleased to now introduce the actual topic. Our three speakers today, our two main speakers, we've got Diane Wetherington. She's the founder and executive chair of the board for iFood Decision Science. We've got Dr. Samir Assar with FDA Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. And again, I'm Beth Olson. I'm the director of Food Safety and Education with the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. Next slide. Just to give you a little bit of a background of who we are a produce grower established organization. We were established back in 1996. We do consider ourselves the united voice of the Southeastern produce industry. Most of our work is on the federal level. Georgia just doesn't have very many state-specific issues and regulations, so we do a lot more work on the national level. We are a trade association representing over 500 members, again, mainly growers, packers, and shippers, but also allied membership. And one of the unique things that the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association did was back in 1999, there was an outcry from our grower members. Food safety had not even been really introduced well as an overall industry or a topic. And all of a sudden they find themselves being asked by their customers, do you have a food safety program? And so they come to us and go, what's a food safety program? That was also about the same time that USDA had rolled out specialty crop block grants. So the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association decided to team up with the University of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Agriculture, and our Georgia Crop Improvement Association. And we created a food safety program where we had the full gamut of consultation, subject matter experts. We wrote SOPs and things of that nature. We did the education. We had a regulatory body with the Department of Agriculture, and then we had the Georgia Crop Improvement Association that could actually go out and do the third-party audits. So it was a really nice system. And then the Global Food Safety Initiative occurred, and there was it just kind of changed the landscape, not necessarily in a negative way, and there were some very positive ways, but it definitely changed the direction that we needed to go. So then we were able to change that Georgia Gap food safety program, add a bunch of new and customized food safety aspects to it, and we rebranded as the Produce Food Safety Services, where we offer customized food safety program development, consulting, and education really nationwide. And we are literally from coast to coast and border to border. Next slide. So I'd like to introduce now Diane Wetherington. Again, she is the founder and the chief of board for iFoods DS. She's going to tell us a little bit more about iFoods and then kick off our presentation. Diane?
Thanks, Beth. And as Beth said, we have worked, we've done 2 previous webinars with the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. And we've worked for several years with Beth and team and of course members of the association with food safety compliance and translating all of the regulatory requirements into practice. Just a little bit about our company. We were founded in 2013. We had the background in working in the industry for several years. We started off in leafy greens, but we've done a number of produce items, produce commodities since that time. And we recognized really the need for software, that the industry was collecting a lot of data, a lot of information, and it's being done with paper manually, and there are ways to streamline that and to really facilitate the analysis of the food safety program. So we've established this company. We've been working with industry. We work with growers and packers, processors, shippers throughout the supply chain in the food safety side and quality side. And then earlier this year, we acquired HarvestMark. HarvestMark is a leader in traceability and quality. And with that acquisition, we extended our reach throughout the supply chain up to the retailers, operations, the food service, and also the large distributors. So it's a very powerful combination with HarvestMark in our mix. We have worked with data over the last few years, well, since essentially our creation as a company, and we understand the needs for protecting the information, protecting the privacy. In addition to that, I'd have to say, as a company, we really value the relationships we have with either the national associations or the regional associations like Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. And we really appreciate your time. We're glad all of you are with us today. And with that, I'd like to introduce Samir, Dr. Samir Sar. Many of you, I'm sure, know Samir. Samir is the director of the Division of Produce Safety and the FDA's Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, commonly referred to as CFSAN. And since 2008, he's led the development of FDA's policy, regulation, and guidance on produce safety, including those areas mandated by the 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act. Dr. Samir provides tremendous leadership in the industry, but also he helps develop plans for the research, the training, and the compliance activities that really help to make our food chain, our produce chain, safer. He is one who's known for working in partnership with the industry and with various stakeholders in the industry, and collaboratively forging initiatives and agreements aimed at protecting public health. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Samir.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you, Beth, for allowing this opportunity to talk with you about data in the new era of smarter food safety. And I greatly appreciate iFood DS as well as Georgia Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Association's leadership on food safety. And we look forward to continued opportunities to work together to address common goals. Again, I want to focus today's discussion on the data and the new era of smarter food safety, which is of course a high priority for the agency that we intend to continue to engage on through advancing our internally and stakeholder-led activities really aimed at implementing a new set of innovative strategies that are effective in flattening the food safety outbreak curve. What I'll do is I'll start out by giving an overview about the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition and how it's situated within FDA, and then cover how we utilize data in the food safety work that we do as an agency and a center. And then I'll give some high-level perspectives about the new era of smarter food safety activities that will lead us into the panel discussion. So on this slide here, there's an organizational chart for FDA, and most of you might know that FDA is a scientific regulatory agency with broad-ranging responsibilities. And these responsibilities include the safety of the nation's domestically produced and imported foods, cosmetics, drugs, biologicals, medical devices, and radiological products. There are multiple centers within FDA that are charged with these activities around these areas. And we have an office that over here to the right, the Office of Regulatory Affairs, that is charged with doing inspections and investigations across all of the areas: drugs, radiological devices, tobacco, et cetera, and foods. And so the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition is regarded as the F in FDA, and is charged with leading food safety initiatives and activities. And if we dive into CFSTAN, I can describe the multiple offices that are really, aimed at enhancing food safety. On the next slide, please. So here's our organizational chart within the center. And as you see, we have the Office of Food Safety, which our program resides currently. And this office is referred to as the program office because it's responsible for driving the seafood, produce, dairy, eggs, retail, food safety program activities. So all of the programs that are around those commodity areas are driven out of this office through divisions that are within the office. And our main focus as an office is to develop science-based policy aimed at preventing outbreaks from happening. And we work with other supporting offices to really make this happen, including the Office's Analytical and Outreach, which is off to kind of the left of the highlighted box. We also work very closely with the Office of Regulatory Sciences, does a lot of the science that supports our work, and the Office of Applied Research and Scientific Assessment. They are also a group of scientists that focused on applied research, and we work with these groups to basically develop research projects that are aimed at informing our policy questions or educational needs. I would say another office that's important to note is the Office of Coordinated Outbreak Response and Evaluation Network. And CORE, as we call it, handles the outbreak response activities such as working with epidemiological and traceback information that is really important to identifying the firms that are linked to the outbreak. And really the goal is to be as quick and as effective as possible so that we can contain the problem before it gets even bigger. So we also work, I want to note, we also work with the Office of Compliance, and I would say that this office is really known to be kind of more of the enforcement arm of the group. So, we like to say that we take a carrot and stick approach to compelling food safety. And while our office, the Office of Food Safety, takes more of what I would consider the carrot approach to support food safety activities that are really aimed at prevention, the Office of Compliance offers the stick in cases where we have bad actors that do not want to implement food safety practices in view of our regulations. And it's just fortunate that these bad actors are few and far between. And we've certainly learned that the vast majority of the produce industry, including fresh and fresh cut commodities, want to do the right thing to make products safe, which is greatly appreciated. And as I mentioned, the Office of Food Safety is primarily charged with developing science-based policy that is aimed at preventing food safety problems such as outbreaks. And the FSMA rules, we call them the FSMA preventive rules, including the Preventive Controls Regulation and the Produce Safety Rule, of which I was the lead with developing, are two of the regulations that are probably the ones that you're most familiar with. We rely on science and data to be the building blocks of everything that we do, including the policy development such as regulations and guidance. One note is that folks often ask about is that whether our policy is based purely on science. And the answer to that, quite frankly, is no. Because as risk managers, we also need to account for potential environmental and economic impacts, among other factors, and really driving at our decisions about our regulations, recognizing the requirements are going to have a huge impact on industry, and practicality and economics plays a big factor as to whether or not the regulations are implementable. I would certainly say that science and risk is by far the biggest drivers of what we do. Here on this slide is a very simple diagram that shows the general data streams that we rely on and how we use data in our work. And believe me, this diagram, I have one that's a lot more complicated, a lot more complex, but we went ahead and simplified that diagram to make this one that is more illustrative for our purposes here. I'll note that there's one box that's missing. Oh, there it is. The top row is our data source and inputs. The middle are the data sources and inputs. The middle box is more of a process that we undertake to kind of analyze the information as it rolls in. And the last row include our outputs that essentially cycle back up to the first row in a food safety feedback loop. And I'll describe what I mean by that in a minute. Our key data sources or inputs are available through the technical assistance that we provide through the various network mechanisms that we've established. Also the research that is available through the scientific community, whether it's funded by FDA or funded otherwise. And information that we collect during our inspections, our farm investigations as follow-up to outbreaks, and just any other farm information that could inform us of potential gaps. And we do a gap analysis basically by comparing what we learn from these inputs to what our current policy is. So, if you look at the produce safety rule or preventive controls regulation, we do kind of a comparative analysis, if you will. Okay, here's what we're seeing as issues according to the data we have. One question that we ask ourselves is the problem or issue a result of a gap in our policy, or is it kind of a lack of implementation of our policies that are already in place? What is the problem? Is it the requirements, the recommendations, or is it just that industry isn't implementing those recommendations or requirements? And so, that answer essentially basically informs what we do, and really helping determine how best to address the problem or how best to address the gap. So as we do this gap analysis and we learn, okay, well, there's some things that need to be done around what we're finding and doing this gap analysis. We look to address the gaps either by working on policy, and that's kind of in that middle box there, the guidance and policy, such as a rule or guidance, or we could do targeted education training, or we could use a data gap that we're seeing a data gap that we're just not aware of or don't know the answer to, and we know that we need to explore further through potentially research. So, and I'll run through a few scenarios about how this would work in kind of an actual, kind of set of situations. And keep in mind that these are just examples. And I'll just say, for example, if we're doing an inspection and we see that farmers are not properly washing their hands, and we know that that issue is addressed in the requirements of the produce safety rule. So the produce safety rule indicates exactly what the farmers should be doing in washing their hands, but the farmers aren't doing it. this may lead us to basically pushing towards a need to do more targeted education, outreach, training on hand washing. If we run into a situation where we're seeing problems with that might be associated with, let's just say, agricultural water use, which is not squarely addressed in the requirements that we put out there, then we know that we need to do some policy making to basically address that particular issue. And we'll do that again through rulemaking or guidance. That is, of course, provided that we have scientific information to support a requirement or recommendation. And so in a case where a farmer is using materials on a packing line that we suspect could be problematic from a food safety standpoint, but we're not sure, then this would be an area ripe for research. And again, that research would be aimed at, adding another piece to the puzzle, and hopefully, in the best case scenario would inform, other risk management decisions such as targeted education training or guidance and policy development. And all of this, again, would be kind of worked through a food safety feedback loop cycle. So as we develop guidance and policy, then it goes right back to the top. We're going to evaluate the scientific data. We're going to look at our inspections. We're going to look at the technical assistance that we do to determine whether or not we need to make improvements. And that is our goal, is continuous improvement. So I talked a little bit about our baseline functionality, and with New Era, we're essentially looking to significantly enhance our approaches that I just described above by working with the community to identify, create, and implement smarter approaches to preventing food safety issues, including outbreaks from happening, and really containing the problem when these food safety issues, including outbreaks, do happen. And as an agency charged with leading food safety in the country, we deem ourselves as playing a vital role with not only directly driving these efforts with support from our scientific and expert base, we are also, in cases, relying on stakeholders to be more in the driver's seat, and we would play more of an influencing role. So we are looking to do both as we move forward with New Era food safety activities, not only driving certain aspects of it, but also playing an influential role. We can talk about that a little bit later on as we discuss various New Era core elements in the panel discussion. Next slide, please. There are 4 core elements that have been identified in the blueprint, and hopefully you're all familiar with these. These are all 4, obviously, that are covered in the blueprint. And in the interest of time, I really wanted to kind of focus more on the core element of which my program is playing the strongest role. And this would be core element 2. And I know the panel discussion will center on items around core element 2. So just, even though the focus will be on core element 2, I wouldn't want to suggest that the other core elements are not important. We certainly are we're big believers. I mean, Frank has definitely been the leader in really exploring ways and moving forward with ways to establish food safety culture. Tech-enabled traceability is also a very, very important activity that we need to get better at. And new business models and retail modernization is also critical, seeing as how this is really one of the last steps of the supply chain that food safety could go wrong. So if you go to the next slide, please, I'll focus on core element 2. And here we have sub-elements of invigorate root cause analysis and strengthen predictive analytic capabilities, as well as outbreak response. And again, I'm not going to go into, I think the panel is going to discuss some of these in more detail, but I'll just kind of top line it on these for now. We're essentially looking for root cause analysis. We're basically looking to pursue this area in a few different ways. And first, we want to look in-house, really kind of looking at ourselves and our government partners to really enhance our root cause analysis procedures and maximize our ability to coordinate with, all of our partners at the federal, state, local, tribal, territorial levels to ensure that we can rapidly and efficiently deploy a team as soon as an outbreak can be traced to a specific site. Time is critical on these outbreaks. The closer we can get to the contamination event, the more we can learn. And the more we learn, again, the more we improve. So that is a key aspect of what we're doing within ourselves. We're also looking outside of FDA to look for opportunities to again, collaborate with our federal, state, and industry partners, but also with academic stakeholders as well as industry, and to really kind of advance and standardize and socialize root cause analysis protocols for food safety. And as with anything else, the communication around all of this is incredibly key. And we would want communication tools to be kind of in order and that in a way where information can be transparently relayed so that, again, the information can be utilized for, common goals across stakeholder groups. At the end of the day, we're just looking to enhance our ability of doing kind of RCI work, or what we call root cause investigation work and root cause analysis work, to define the source and the route of contamination associated with the problem. And we want industry and other stakeholders to be able to do their own RCAs, potentially in a way that we don't need to be involved. And as long as it meets a food safety goal, we don't feel like we need to be involved in every case of root cause analysis. It's not only a federal function, if you will, or state function, but we were looking for industry to really step up and provide a process or really kind of move forward with RCAs in a way where they are taking action themselves and would not require any federal intervention. With advancing predictive analytics, we're aimed at really expanding the public and private data sources and tools that could be utilized to determine, whether conditions are right for a contamination event before it actually happens, so that measures can be taken to prevent it. We see predictive analytics really being utilized by all stakeholders, again, vested in food safety, and certainly FDA could use it to notify partners about a likelihood of an event. However, just like I mentioned with RCA, this could be a source of information that growers could utilize for their own purposes and basically take their own steps to predict a potential contamination event and take their own actions without notifying FDA or anyone else about what they're doing. We'd love for the information that would be, that would be acted on and the actions that are taken to be shared in a broad and aggregated way, but it does not need to include company-specific information or even, field information. It's just, some general information that is useful and does have value in being utilized by FDA as well as other stakeholders. So that's my overview about the FDA and the center and how we process data and how we expect to advance this work through the work that we're doing on New Era for Smarter Food Safety. And again, I think this is a pretty good lead in for a panel discussion. At this point, I'll turn it over to Diane.
Thanks, Samir. And let's start off. So I have a series of questions that we wanted to look at around really the areas that Samir was last discussing. So the data trust, the root cause analysis, and to the extent we can get to talk about predictive modeling and the future of data, we'll touch upon those two as well. So let me start, and if you go, yes, thank you. And the next slide is the first question is, what is the value of this public-private data trust? Samir mentioned the idea of having a data trust for the ability to do the root cause analysis or the predictive analytics going forward. And there has been conversation about this, but what does this mean? I mean, what is it that would be, what do you think the source of collaboration would be, or what would the benefits be to both the government side and to the private industry side? And Samir, maybe you want to expand a little bit on what you said before about that before I turn it to Beth.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it, Diane. I appreciate that. I think there has been some progress. We are aware of certain stakeholders that are leading efforts to establish a public and private data trust. And we know from experience and kind of working with other stakeholders that are interested in really moving forward in this area, that the key word in this is trust. And you know, providing the level of information that would be useful, but making sure that that information, to the extent possible, is not utilized against the grower or processor that is providing the information. So I think there's a broad recognition of, hey, we want to help and we want to do the right thing. But at the same time, there is that possibility or the thought of a potential consequence that could go right back to the farm and hurt them. We believe that there is a way to strike the right balance and establish a data trust that provides the right level of information at an aggregated level that could be useful for, you know, common purposes, without, you know, that chance or a minimized chance of it being utilized for, you know, punitive purposes or whatever, legal purposes. We think that balance can be struck, and there's definitely some promise in that regard. And we've been working around it or with this for a long time, and we will continue. This is important to us. We really think this is incredibly important. I think we're in an unfortunate space right now with respect to how information could be utilized for legal purposes. I know other countries don't have that same situation. I talked to someone from the Food Safety Australia and New Zealand organization, and they're baffled by why industry is not providing, information to the government, and so they have a different food safety system. There's a different set of considerations there. I definitely get that, but it kind of shows again how important trust is in this to establish it in a way that, again, would be useful for common purposes.
Is there a way to actually only share information, say when you have an issue, a potential food safety issue? Is that being contemplated, or is this data trust looking at sharing data on a regular basis for research, or both?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in my view, I mean, I guess, I don't know if you're asking me, Diane, or just asking
Yeah,
me.
I'm asking you still. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, just real quickly, I'd say all of the above. I mean, I think primarily, we don't see it as an end-all, be-all for us. We're not looking for it for our purposes solely. We would want it to be available to as many stakeholders as possible that could take advantage of the information and do something, productive and beneficial with it. And we know that that's out there. I mean, you got the NCBI, that has been very, useful over time. And so, that was achieved. And so the hope is that something similar could be achieved around, kind of farm findings, if you will.
Thank you. So Beth, turning to you. I mean, yes, I know there are concerns around the sharing of the data, the public-private trust, but do you see benefits for private companies even establishing a data trust? I mean, maybe they make it accessible to the FDA at some point. Do you see those benefits?
I definitely see some benefits there. I think that different parts of the country and even different industries within the produce industry, different commodity industries within the overall produce industry are in different stages of adoption, different stages of contemplation. I think that having an overall data trust within a company is very valuable. Looking at the overall smarter era for food safety, there is a push, not a requirement, to move from paper to electronic records. It would make sense if an organization already had those electronic records. There wouldn't be so much staff catch-up time if and when there was an incident and FDA made a phone call and requested those electronic documents to be sent. Also thinking about the data trust, and this is just the day-to-day that Diane, you and I deal with all the time, and that's just the data trends. And I think part of this is the language that we're using, and we're needing to get the overall produce industry and all the different players, the growers, the packers, the shippers, and beyond, used to this nomenclature and the language that we're using. So a data trust. It's just electronic data that you can look at and begin to analyze, and you can see when there's trends. And instead of looking through days and weeks and months of paper checklists to figure out if one area is an ongoing issue or not. So I definitely think that building a data trust within an organization is very valuable, can be very valuable. And then ultimately being able to share it with FDA if and when there's a need. Right.
Thank you. Yeah. So, the idea that could be value to private industry, that you could anonymize the data so that perhaps you're not coming back to a location or operation, so that it would be beneficial. But if you did have a problem, the FDA could very quickly determine where that problem occurred, combined with the traceability information to really go after the next question in our series here, which is focused on the root cause analysis. Let me just, before we move over to that question, just quickly ask Samir, is there a formal process for establishing the data trust, or how would we go about getting more information about forming a relationship with the FDA along those lines?
Yeah, and I would just say that I mentioned in my presentation that the FDA on New Era for smarter food safety items, we either play kind of a driving role with the activity or an influencing role. And I would say with the data trust, we see ourselves at this point as playing more of an influencing role. Not to say that things can't change, but I think in a sense, it makes a lot of sense for stakeholders to really kind of get going on this. and it'll take us some time to get something established that would be, kind of useful for everyone's purposes. Yeah, I would say that we don't have a particular framework, Diane, in mind. Mm-hmm. I would certainly connect with those groups that have undertaken this type of activity and figure out what's worked for them. You have. No framework to follow as far as I'm aware of. We certainly don't have a framework to follow in that regard. But we would be certainly willing to play influencers and provide technical assistance so you are aware of what would be useful for our purposes, not necessarily only needs to be developed for our purposes. We would just, it would be obviously a shame for us not to be able to use the information. We also see that it should be utilizable by other stakeholders.
Right. Great. Thank you. So moving to the next question, which is on the root cause analysis. And this is, I think, starts to get really exciting for people. Beth, I'm going to look to you. This is, root cause analysis is not new in the industry. People use it already all the time in some of their daily operations. I mean, can you give us some examples of how it's used today?
Oh, I mean, pick one. There's so many. And again, I think, our focus is much more on, it's on that grower, packer, shipper level. And the size of the operations here on the East Coast are definitely different than the size of operations on the West Coast. So I think that, again, the language that we're using, we're calling it root cause analysis instead of, well, what happened? Well, why did it happen? Well, where did it break down? Well, how can we make it better? So I think, again, just as an overall, getting people used to again, the language that we're using. So this happens every day throughout the day on farms, in packing facilities, in processing facilities of, again, there was a breakdown. How did it break down? Whatever it might be. Is it, was it something made it through the metal detector, or did somehow we missed the, checking the sanitizer level in the water, or you name it. So this happens all the time. And so formalizing it and beginning to talk about it more and more is always a very positive thing, in my opinion, in the produce industry.
Okay. And Samir, could you give us maybe some examples of how the FDA in your group uses the root cause analysis?
Yeah, so what we do is we do more of what's called root cause investigations, which actually involves a very formalized system, kind of an incident command system to, send out, our field and have technical expertise aligned to provide the technical capacity that's needed to do a thorough investigation or root cause investigation of after an event. And so, we want to, obviously, and our RCIs are not triggered. There's a lot of criteria that need to be met before we just, get that going. I would say a smaller outbreak would initiate a root cause investigation at all. It would have to be a significant, multi-state, multiple farm outbreak, probably, where we would do something like that. And so, yeah, so we send our team out there. We work with other federal agencies, as well as the states are really important for us, and not just the state, kind of the food, the state departments that are responsible for food, whether it be Department of Ag or Department of Health. We sometimes, work with EPA and the state, component of EPA, if you will, the state environmental agency, depending on what the situation is. And we also work with wildlife services as well. So it's kind of this integrated approach, a systematic approach to really, investigating as comprehensively as possible the problem to figure out what the source and the route of contamination was. And so that's we take all of the information that is generated through that work and just, sort it out and analyze it and figure out, if we can clearly identify a problem or develop leading hypotheses around what we've seen.
Great.
And so, yeah, that's one way that we do it. And again, to the extent that industry could take that on, we'd be certainly interested in learning from what it is finding and doing root cause analysis, as that could also feed into, again, our efforts to prevent these outbreaks from occurring.
Great, thank you. So if we could move, say, to the next question, which is, once we've done the root cause analysis, we can use this for predictive modeling. And I think, Samir, you had a definition before predictive modeling. So I think it's one of the things in the industry, everybody talks about predictive modeling, but what is your definition? How would you define predictive modeling?
Good question.
I feel like I'm on the spot just a little bit.
No spot. There's no spot. You're good.
All right. So yes, predictive modeling, in my view, and I would say, it's the agency view for sure, is that the really resides on the ability to anticipate a food safety event, a contamination event, before it actually happens. What are the factors that are, if, or criteria, if met, or set of conditions that are met, are essentially pointing towards a situation that is ripe for a contamination event. And so, looking at that form of analysis and providing information through predictive modeling, not only could that be utilized for, again, our purposes, so that we can contact the people that we need to contact to let them know, hey, we've got a, potential problem in this region. Not necessarily for compliance and enforcement. It's more just letting them know, you've got a potential situation on your hands. So, states, you might want to take a look at this, or whoever. So we've used it like that. But I would also say in some cases, and in very urgent cases, we would have to use that information to do inspections, and really, get out there and evaluate further through on-ground truthing as to whether that there is a problem, and do something about it. And that information, essentially, as you conduct those activities, would feed right back into a predictive modeling mechanism, which would in turn make it stronger for the next time you need to use it. So that is how we look at it.
So, and thank you. That was a really great answer, Samir. So Beth, the interesting thing is we both work very closely with companies and their food safety operations, and we know that the food safety people are overwhelmed. And one of the things is trying to understand what the focus should be in terms of prioritization, right? So do you think the predictive modeling would help companies if we could get to a point where this was as commonplace as maybe the root cause analysis, so that they know what to focus on, where they're spending, maybe where they should put the majority of their resources? I mean, what do you think?
Yes. Any and all of that is a big yes, if it's going to make it easier to focus and prioritize. I think some of the issues, though, that swirl around that is so often we deal with, of course, we have our larger companies that have professional food safety staff, but then we have our medium and our small companies that they don't have professional staff. They have somebody that's been there long enough to be able to juggle food safety along with the other hats that they wear. Those are the companies, quite honestly, that really could benefit from more discussions about root cause analysis and more discussions around predictive modeling. Those often are also the companies that are not going to be familiar with the terms root cause analysis and predictive modeling. So overcoming that apprehension just with terminology, I think, is a small challenge, but yet it's the first challenge. And then helping them understand what is predictive modeling, and how is there a system in place? Is it something like, is it anything similar to HACCP? And all of them are familiar with HACCP. So I have a piece of paper and I've got all of my different charts, and I fill in all the different columns, and then I'm able to look across, and then I'm able to create my critical control points and things of that nature. Is this an electronic system that I'm entering in somewhere? And then is it going to spit something out? So I think those are a little bit far-fetched, but I definitely think that there are some challenges that we have to overcome. I think, though, once we do overcome them, and once this becomes a common practice, I definitely feel like this is something that's going to help the overall industry, yes, to prioritize, to be able, and it also gives, whether it's a large company with professional staff and multi-level staff, or whether it's that medium to small that have one or two people that are doing this, it's going to give them then the power and the data to be able to go to ownership and directors and supervisors to say, hey, we really need to talk about this. I either need some funding, or I need some backing, or I need more of X, Y, and Z, because this is what we're beginning to see for the predictive modeling or for that root cause analysis. And I feel like we need to start taking measures. So it's going to give them, they're going to have more of a voice than they really ever had.
Let me just ask both of you this question. Do you feel that as an industry, we're in a position where we're doing a lot of predictive modeling today?
Do you want me to go, Beth?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I can't really speak for industry, I guess. That's what I was wondering. But I would say, based on my understanding, I would say industry isn't really driving this at this point. I would say it's more academia that's driving this. I think industry is definitely interested, but in terms of who's actually kind of leading the work and all of that, I would say it's definitely more of an academically driven thing with definite need for industry involvement to create something that is workable and informative.
I would go back to my previous statement that I think there are different commodity industries within the overall industry that are much more plugged into and utilizing predictive modeling and root cause analysis than others. And I would agree that this is probably more academic than it is industry led. But again, I think there are some of those researchers and some of those are really plugged into some of the groups, some of the ag groups and lettuce and leafy greens, for example. I know they are looking at data inside and out, upside down, to try to figure it out. And I know that there has been lots of discussion of having that openness and that transparency and sharing data with FDA. So I think different parts of the country and different industries within the overall produce industry are open to it.
Okay, great. So let me go to the next question. And this really looks at, okay, today we have, I think as Beth mentioned, we have some commodity groups who are probably looking at data, evaluating data. Maybe it's more from just the history, the necessity surrounding it. But if you were to take a look at the next 10 years, data in the industry, where do you think we're going? What do you think is going to be the case, and how common or how familiar are people going to be to using data in their operations, food safety operations in that time?
So we've got a little less than 7 minutes left. I think this is like one of those futuristic, in the year 2030, will we be living on the moon? So I think in the next 10 years, I think data will be a huge part of farms, packers, shippers, much more than it already is. I think there's going to be a greater awareness that so much of this data has already been collected, but it may just not be in a format that is easy to read, review, and analyze. I think that the produce industry, again, growers, packers, and shippers very specifically, they're going to have to begin to look at this request for data, the demand for data, not only from FDA and other regulatory organizations, but also from their own customers. And they're going to have to say, I'm not just going to answer the question of send us this data or send us this report. but I'm collecting this data. How can I actually use this data work? How can I make this data work for me instead of just having a bunch of numbers stuck in a binder somewhere? So I think that data is going to increase. I definitely think that there will be a push and a move to electronic data, much more over paper data. And I also think that because of that, there's going to be companies very similar to just like iFood that are going to make it easy to collect that data, easy to analyze that data, and then make those quick decisions if and when it's needed.
Okay. Samir?
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with Beth's assessment. I think we'll have a lot more data points. The question is, will those data points be organized in a way that will be useful? And I think we need to figure out I think one limitation for making the information available and useful are, legal concerns, quite frankly. So we have to figure out how to get past that. And I'm not sure what the answer is. The legal concerns are probably the most the most challenging concerns to really deal with as an industry. That's very kind of concerned about lawsuits, which is natural. So anyway, that's my view on it.
So it seems that the collaborative private-public partnership arrangements on data is going to be really critical for making the data grow as an asset for the industry in the future. So I want to thank you both for the discussion, and Beth, turn it back over to you.
So any of the attendees, if you have questions for any of us, please feel free to enter those into the Zoom Q&A or the chat box, and we'll be moderating those. I definitely agree with the comments that Samir made, that with the data trust and then what it's going to look like in moving forward. I think he hit the large majority of the big questions that we have. How is it going to be collected? How will it be used? How can we ensure that this information is being used for the good of the industry, and that it doesn't necessarily somehow all of a sudden it's taken and twisted and it comes back in any kind of negative way to the grower, to the industry. So that, not that there didn't need to be reassurance, Samir, but there is definitely a reassurance there that y'all are thinking through some of those issues. So thank you for that. We're not getting any questions, so I think we were just a really good panel.
We stumped the audience. Okay.
Absolutely. So I think then to wrap this up, thank you very much to Diane and Samir, to iFood for working with us, the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, of putting this on. Very, very timely with the rollout of FDA's Smarter Era for Food Safety. It's going to be, I know that our entire industry is watching. The blueprint was very helpful, very insightful, but I also feel like the devil's in the details. Not that there's a devil, but just to use the term. So I think we're all interested to see how this is going to roll out and how it's going to apply. So thank you all for attending. This is a great quote. At the end of the day, it's not about technology. It's about public health and customer confidence in our product and the business problems that we're trying to solve. Technology is there. It can be a booger sometimes, but most of the time it is there to advance what we're doing, to make our lives easier. As with FDA and the Smarter Era of Food Safety, technology is here to stay, and technology is definitely the future of food safety. So growers, packers, and shippers, let's make sure that we get on top of this ball and let's figure out how we can harness this data to utilize it for our benefit and for the good of our overall organizations, and how can we use predictive modeling, or whatever term you want to call it. How can we use root cause analysis to figure out what happened and why it happened, and how can we mitigate that in the future. So thank you all for attending. Again, thank you, Diane and Samir, and y'all have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Beth.